a young boy, at the age of about 16 or 17. His name is Tha'laba radiyallahu anhu. Tha'laba radiyallahu anhu was one of the active youth in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, who obeyed the Messenger ﷺ, and his heart was firm in the belief of the Quran, and he was completely convinced in the existence of Allah, and he anticipated and sacrificed everything to reach Jannah.
And he used to always run errands for the Prophet ﷺ. He would send him here and he would send him there to do something for him. So one day the Prophet ﷺ sent him to do something, and he was walking through the city of Medina, and he passed by a house with an open door. So he glanced inside and he saw a type of curtain that they used to cover the shower area. And the wind blew that curtain, and he saw a woman, a Muslim woman inside that was bathing. And it's as if he glanced for too long, or he looked for a bit too long until he saw something, and then he came to his senses. So he was overtaken by an extreme feeling of guilt and hypocrisy. And he said to himself, A'udhu Billah, the Prophet, how can I be of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, one who is close to him, who runs his errands, and be so horrible as to disrespect the people's privacy? So then he says, I disrespect the awrah of the Muslims. Wallahi, Allah is going to send ayat and reveal and mention me with the hypocrites. So he feared to return to the Prophet ﷺ, who would tell him that he is a hypocrite. So he ran away out of fear. He ran away.
And he headed towards the cliffs. And he stayed up there. When he didn't return to the Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet began to become worried. And he said, where is Tha'laba? I hope nothing has happened to him. The next day came and Tha'laba hadn't returned. So he sent his companions outside to look for him. And when they went and they tried and they returned, they said, Ya Rasulullah, we don't know where he is. And they kept the search going for about a week. Until finally the Prophet ﷺ sent Abu Bakr and Umar for a special task to look for him and find him. He said, go, look out into the outskirts of Medina, into the cliffs and the hills, into the forests and in the trees. Search every tent, ask anyone that you see, and search for Tha'laba. I'm very worried about Tha'laba. And so they went out, and it took them weeks to search for him. Until finally they approached this village where they found a shepherd with his goats. And they approached him and said, have you seen a young man? His descriptions are so and so. He is of this height. And his name is Tha'laba. He said, are you asking about the crying boy? They said, what crying boy? He said, the boy that weeps a lot. There is a young boy that sits up in those cliffs over there. Our village hears him every night crying. And we don't know what his matter is. Every day he comes down and he drinks a bit of milk from my goats. And then he would drag himself back up into the mountains. And they said, this is surely Tha'laba. So Abu Bakr and Umar went up to the mountain and they searched for him until they found him, sheltered away underneath leaves. His clothes were torn apart. He was withered away. He was so skinny. There was a disease in his skin. And he was extremely sick. They thought that he was dying. So then they grabbed him. And as soon as Tha'laba saw them, as though terror had happened to him, as if the angel of death came to him. He tried to struggle and run away, but they chased him and caught him. And then they grabbed him. And he said, please, please, don't take me to the Prophet ﷺ. Don't take me to him. Don't take me to him. I'm too scared. They said, what is wrong with you? Take a hold of yourself, ya Tha'laba. He said, please don't take me to him. I know what you are. I know why you are taking me to him. Allah has sent a verse down concerning me, hasn't he? He's sent a verse down concerning me, hasn't he? He said, Ya Tha'laba, we don't know why the Prophet ﷺ is asking for you. Please come with us. He said, yes, I know why. I know why. They said, Wallahi, we have to take you to him. It is a commandment from the Prophet. And so they dragged him on his feet towards the Prophet ﷺ. And they placed him in his house. And they told him Tha'laba is at his home. So the Prophet ﷺ came to him. And he kneeled down and kissed him on his forehead. And he said to him, Ya Tha'laba, what is wrong? And he said, Ya Rasulullah, are you hiding it from me? He said, what am I hiding? He said, Allah has sent down the verse concerning me that I am one of the hypocrites, hasn't he? Prophet ﷺ looked at him and he was crying. And the Prophet ﷺ said to him, "No, Ya Tha'laba, Allah has not sent anything in your cause." And then he said, "I am going to be punished, Ya Rasulullah." And then the Prophet ﷺ said to him, "Ya Tha'laba, min madha takhaf? What are you fearing?" And he said, "I fear that Allah is going to place me into the lowest place of hellfire. I did a great sin, Ya Rasulullah." And then the Prophet ﷺ said to him, "Atakhafu min ghadabillah? Are you fearing the anger of Allah?" He said, "Yes." He said, وَلَكِنَّ الْمُؤْمَنَ يَرْجُو. A mu'min also has another belief, and that is hope. ماذا ترجو يا ثعلبة? What do you hope for? What do you wish for? What do you yearn for? And he said, إِنِّي أَرْجُو رَحْمَةَ اللَّهِ. I hope for the mercy of Allah and His forgiveness. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, فَاسْأَلِ اللَّهَ بِمَا تَرْجُو. Then ask Allah with that which you are hoping for. وَاجْعَلِ الظَّنَّ بِاللَّهِ حَسَنًا. And make your assumption about Allah good. You will find it. And then he made a dua. And the Prophet ﷺ read on his head and made a dua for him. Then all of a sudden, Tha'laba said, "Ya Rasulullah, I feel as though there are thousands of ants crawling on my body." He said to him, "Awatajidu dhalika ya Tha'laba? Can you really feel that?" And he said, "Yes, Ya Rasulullah. And I'm about to go unconscious." And then the Prophet ﷺ said to him, إِنَّهُ الْمَوْتُ قَدْ نَزَلَ بِكَ يَا ثَعْلَبَ فَقُلْ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. It is death. It has now come and struck on you. You are dying, Ya Tha'laba. So say, "La ilaha illallah." And then Tha'laba began to repeat those words. He said, "Say, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah." And he repeated those words until finally his soul escaped from his body.
Prophet ﷺ washed him and covered him and led the prayer over him. And while they were carrying him to the cemetery, the Prophet ﷺ was walking behind his body, but he was walking on the tip of his toes as if it were very, very crowded. So then Umar says to him, "Ya Rasulullah, tamshi ala atrafi qadamayk, wal nasu qad awsa'u lak." You're walking on the tip of your toes, but the people have given you a lot of room. So he says, "Ya Umar, wayhaka ya Umar, may Allah have mercy on you, Umar. Wallahi, I do not find a place to put my foot because of how the angels are crowding me over." Brothers and sisters in Islam, Anas radiallahu anhu said that he says to the generation after the companions, "You imagine certain sins to be more insignificant than a straw." Something like a straw, which is very insignificant. But at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, we used to count them among those things that can destroy a man. And in this story, Tha'laba ibn AbdulRahman radiallahu anhu, he did something. He took a gaze, but it became so much of a weight, that sin. And this is something that so many people have taken for granted. Looking at images of women in magazines, on television, on the internet. And people have become so used to it that they don't even think about it. How many people think of lowering their gaze from the newscaster? Do you look at the news? They watch the news. You're watching the news. But there's a woman who has a lot of makeup and you're looking at her the whole time. People don't even remember to lower their gaze. Ibn Mas'ud said, "A believer treats a sin as if it were a mountain over his head that may fall on him any moment, where a regular sinner looks at them like a fly that sat on his nose and he waved it away with his hand." The believer, the sin is like a mountain that's going to fall on you any minute. But for the person who sins normally, sits on your nose, you go like this and it's gone. And that's why then, lowering the gaze, things like that, people have become so used to looking at things that are haram. That's why the Prophet ﷺ said, "Beware of minor sins, for they add on until they destroy a man."
قل للمؤمنين يغضوا من أبصارهم ويحفظوا فروجهم ذلك أزكى لهم إن الله خبير